Follow the Figure 4 Fallout on social media. We're on Facebook at www.facebook.com/figure 4 Fallout and on Twitter at Figure 4 Fallout. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Figure 4 Fallout, and on the phone lines at this time, our guest, WWE legend, Hall of Famer, the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Mr. DiBiase, thank you for joining us this evening on the Figure 4 Fallout.
It is my pleasure to be with you.
And definitely looking forward to talking a little bit of wrestling with you here and talking a little bit about your ministry as well. I know Casey Malone and I, that's a big part of our life as well, so we're definitely looking forward to talking to you about that as well. But talking a little bit wrestling, you made an appearance a few weeks ago on Old School Raw, and I just got to first off ask you, did you ever track down Daniel Bryan for that $100 bill that you put in Titus O'Neil's mouth?
Well, that was my money, so I did. People ask me that all the time. They say, you stuff those $100 bills in those guys' mouths. Did they keep the money? And I said, as soon as the camera went off, I told Virgil, I said, get the money back. All the money that I did give away, though, and I gave away a lot of money, but the money I gave away wasn't my money. It was, it belonged to the real $1 Million Man, Vince McMahon. Well, actually, at my Hall of Fame induction, when we did that stunt at the very end where I said, well, if I've got to prove it one more time, then I can make you do this or that, and that if you think you don't have a price, for my money, then I said, then I let the money rain, and they dropped $10,000 out of the ceiling.
Really?
Yeah, it was incredible. And so when I walked backstage, Vince looked at me and he said, well, kid, as usual, that was fantastic. He said, but you're still costing me a lot of money.
Yeah, I'd say Vince doesn't like to let a lot of his money go unless it's well deserved. I guess if you want to look at it that way. You probably by far probably one of the best heels, I guess, in the wrestling business that we've seen, and we've seen it try to maybe be imitated and all that.
My favorite heel of all time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
The entire, I guess, tasks that you had people do. How did you all end up coming up with those ideas?
Well, some of the ideas were mine, but a lot of the ideas came from other people. The one thing that I did that I get asked about more than any other thing was when we had the little boy at the event and the basketball, and I told him if he dribbled the ball 50, he dribbled it for me 10 times, and I said, okay, if you can do that again 15 times without missing, you got $500. And so, of course, he gets to 14. And the really cool thing about it is you could tell that he was trying. It's like he was a little kid, and my fear was that he would mess up. But if he messed up, then it's okay. I still don't give him the money, but it's better if I jilt him out of it. And so he gets to 14. Of course, I stick my foot out and kick the ball. And then tell him he doesn't get the money, and he gets great big crocodile tears and runs to his mother. And of course, when I got back in the back, everybody said, "Oh man, that was great." I said, "I'm glad you liked it." And that get me an armored vehicle to get me out of the building. But no, all those things obviously were staged. Now, here's the thing. Anything that we did on TV, when like the kid in the basketball. I did another one with, I made a girl get on her knees and bark like a dog, and I can't remember. There were a couple others. Now, those were all, staged. They were all rehearsed because it was television. But the ones that were the most fun were the ones at the live events that weren't staged. When I was first introduced and I was first, going to all the towns and as the $1 Million Man, I'd get through with the match, and I'd say, hey, I got $300 here, to prove once again that everybody's got a price. I got $300 here for somebody who will, and when I wouldn't tell them what I was going to do, and then, I'd get somebody in the ring, and I'd say, okay, all you got to do is, I said, Virgil, take off my boot and my sock. Yeah, I've been wrestling up here for 20 minutes. My feet are sweaty. They stink. I said, I want you to kiss my stinking, sweaty feet.
Wow.
Now a little trivia for you. If you want to ask a question in the future from somebody, you can ask this question: what present-day WWE star, or was a recent WWE star, actually kissed my feet years ago? And the answer is Rob Van Dam.
Really? Holy.
When he was a little kid, and we were in Michigan, and Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when I asked, who wants to do it, and I picked a little kid, and that little kid grew up to be Rob Van Dam.
Huh. Oh, wow.
When I met him later, I asked him, I said, look, I've got another foot. You want to kiss it too?
Well, my question is, did he kiss the other foot?
Oh, no.
So, sorry, this is Bo Kid with the show. I have a question here, actually. I know, of course, the $1 Million Man and everything. What came about whenever you introduced the $1 Million Championship? How did that come about with the entire situation?
Originally, the thought was, I came on the scene, and I came on like right after WrestleMania 3. This is right after Andre the Giant had dropped the title to Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan was now the WWF champion. He was the star, and Andre and Hulk, they never touched each other. They never had another match, nothing, until Saturday Night Main Event in February of, I guess it would have been February of '88, because it was the setup for WrestleMania 4. And it might have been, I don't know, that might have been December of '87, but it was the first time that wrestling was on national network television. Well, here's the deal was, originally we thought that we would go to WrestleMania 4, and what it was, I in my arrogance said, I'm going to prove that there's nothing, absolutely nothing I can't buy. I'm going to buy the world title. Mm-hmm. And they're, well, you can't do that. How you can do that? So I'm going to hire Andre the Giant. He's going to wrestle Hogan again. He's going to beat him, and he's going to sell me the belt. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so, of course, in the storyline of wrestling, we have this match on national network television. Andre and Hogan, and one of the referees goes down, and then outruns his identical twin. And the evil twin brother counts Hogan's, shoulders to the mat when he's obviously got one high in the air, and awards Andre the match and gives me the belt. And it was just great. And so then 2 weeks later, supposed to be, the head guy of WWF, Jack Tunney, strips me of the belt, says you can't do that. And now we have a problem because we can't, technically, Hulk lost the belt, so he can't give it back to him. Andre won't take it because he sold it to me. So what do we do? Well, that's when they came up with the tournament to crown a new WWF champion, and that was WrestleMania 4.
Correct.
So originally, the thought was that I would somehow sneaky, underhandedly win WrestleMania 4, and then I'd go on around and I'd have this run with Hogan and be wrestling him all the time. And there were, other things going on, in terms of other titles. I think there was a dispute with Honky Tonk and Honky Tonk Man and Randy Savage about the Intercontinental Belt. And I think they were trying to make everybody happy. But anyway, Pat Patterson came to me and he said, look, Ted, he says, let me ask you a question. What would serve your purpose better, and what would make you more money? If we put the WWF title on you for a little while, obviously, if you're the champion, you're gonna make good money. You're gonna go around and work with Hogan. But the bottom line is, if you're going around and you're working with Hogan, you're going to make the money anyway, whether you have the title or not.
Correct.
And so, but what's going to bring you greater heat if you're illegally, some underhanded way, you get the title. That's happened again and again. But what if you don't win the title? What if you don't win the title, and in your arrogance you say, I don't need it, I'm going to create my own? And then you actually show up every night with this beautiful belt, and you defend your own title. And I said, that's the ticket. And I mean, and it did. People ask me all the time. They said, aren't you sad that you were never actually officially a WWF or WWE world champion? And I said, well, absolutely, of course, you would always like to say that you held the world title, but I mean, in wrestling, titles are props, guys. It's a business. And realistically, I mean, even though I would have liked to have had the title, no, I don't miss it, because the $1 million belt was the ticket, and it's still the ticket. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I go, and when I go to independent shows now, and I don't do a lot of independent shows, but I do them from time to time. And of course, I don't wrestle anymore. And
correct.
They'll have me as a guest, commissioner for the evening and what have you. But I mean, people love to get in the ring and take a picture with the $1 Million Man and the $1 Million belt. And so I take I don't take the belt with me. The belt is the property of the WWE.
Correct.
The belt, when it was first created in 1988, its estimated value was $40,000.
Oh my God!
All of the stones in that belt, they're not diamonds, but they are all cubic zirconium.
Correct.
Which is almost a diamond.
Yeah.
And there's like 700 of those in that belt. 700 times $40 is $40,000.
That's man.
Yeah, and so it's gold plate. It's a heavy belt. But the funny thing is that on the back side of the belt, the part that if I put the belt on is resting against my stomach, there's 2 real diamonds.
Really?
And I saw those, and I went, okay, what's this? And they said, oh, those are real diamonds. And I said, well, nobody can see them. What's the point? And they said, well, Ted, if anybody ever asks you, are the diamonds real, you could say yes, and you won't be lying.
Love it.
Gotta love loopholes.
Oh, yeah.
Our graphic designer, Jeremiah Massengill, he wanted us to ask you, how did the iconic laugh that you have, the $1 Million laugh, how'd that come about?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I don't, like that laugh is obviously super over exaggerated, but I guess my natural laugh is, and I have a very deep voice, so my natural laugh is somewhat like that. It's like, people, if I'm somewhere and something strikes me funny, and I go, but okay, gosh, that sounds like, well, it is, but it's not. Well, I did an interview one day. It used to, back before, we were on national television every week, we would do interviews for individual markets. So, I'd be on there with Mean Gene Okerlund, and Mean Gene would say, hey, $1 Million Man is coming to Milwaukee this week, or whatever the date is, and da-da-da-da-da, and so anyway, we were doing these interviews, and we do them every 3 weeks. And so I was doing an interview, and at the end of the interview, I just really cackled, like, I did the laugh, and Vince just happened to be walking by. And
he's perfect timing.
He stopped and he stepped back in the room and he looked at me and he said, Ted, that is it. He said, from now on, every time you do an interview, you start the interview and you end the interview with that laugh. And there it was. And so...
Ted, I got a quick question. This is Jordan Gossett here on the show. I just got a quick question. Who is your favorite wrestler that you've worked with, like out of everybody? I know you probably have a couple, but just who's a couple? Just name it.
Well, yeah, again, it's hard to pick one guy. Well, some of the guys that I love to wrestle were guys that helped me become a good wrestler. And those are guys, you know, like that are a little older than me, and that kind of almost like the generation before me. You know, Dick Murdoch was one of those guys. A guy named Carl Cox, Killer Carl Cox. Terry Funk. Terry Funk was like one of my mentors. You know, Terry, as crazy as Terry, a lot of people, you know, a lot of the modern era, or the people that remember Terry Funk as a wrestler, they remember him as the guy that did all the wild, crazy matches, you know, with ECW. Terry Funk was as good a technical wrestler as anybody. I mean, he was an NWA world champion as well, you know. So the Funk brothers, those guys. But amongst my peers, I loved working with Jake Roberts, because Jake was great. I loved working with Bret Hart. You know, I had a lot of great matches with Randy Savage.
Yes, you
and,
did.
You know, those were just a couple of the guys that I really enjoyed working with, because, you know, back then we kind of called it doing the dance.
Yes.
You know, we would go out there, and the art form of wrestling, the real art form of wrestling is it's improv. It's you know, and when we were working the circuit, when we were working the same towns every week, we'd go back to the same towns every week, and it was almost like I said, it's like people that watch a TV show every week. Well, you know, it's like a soap opera, and you've got to keep the people's interest. You know, it's like, okay, what can we do this week? You know, and to entertain the people, but by the same token, we got to hook them so they'll be sure to come back next week. And so that made you think. And so when you would go to these towns every week and you'd have to do something different all the time, you had to think. You had to think on your feet, and so you learned. You know, I mean, and back then, you know, I mean, gosh, you know, a short match would be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You know, today, if you ask some of these guys to go 30 minutes, they look at you like,
what?
You know, 30 minutes? Oh my gosh, you know, I couldn't remember a match that's 30 minutes long. Well, you're not supposed to. And I never knew what I was going to do in the ring. The only thing I knew for certain when I walked in the ring was exactly how the match was going to end, which was the hook. That's what got them back, and the rest of it became improv.
Yeah.
And so when you had that chemistry with another wrestler, it just made it that much easier. So, and those were the guys that I was able to do that with.
I know something that we don't see a lot of nowadays right now is managers, and of course on Old School Raw you managed the primetime players. You managed the likes of Steve Austin before. I mean, you've
Psycho
done
Sid
Psycho Sid.
with the, you know, and then of course you shift gears, and of course he was also in WCW with the NWO.
It seems like the manager is kind of a lost art form, I guess, if you look at it. Why do you think that is? Well,
you know, I think our managers, realistically, managers. There was a time when managers were they would be put with somebody for one of the two reasons. Like if you had somebody that had a really good look or had a really good character, and they were really good in the ring. I mean, they were great workers, but they just weren't really good. They didn't have great mic skills. They didn't cut good interviews. Well, how do you get around that? You give them a manager. You give them somebody that can talk for them, you know, and they just go out there and they stand there and grimace and whatever, you know, and you give them a mouthpiece, you know, you give them a little help. And the other reason that you would give someone as a manager is almost like to help groom them. Like it's like, you know, the guy's almost there, but he's not quite there. When I was given to Steve Austin, you know, Steve Austin was stunning. Steve Austin, he wasn't, he wasn't
rattlesnake.
Yeah, he wasn't a rattlesnake when I was managing him, but I can remember telling him, you know, I said, you know, what you're doing is great. I said, you have a rugged style. It's different. It's unique. And I said, keep doing what you're doing. I said, you know, it's going to take you longer to get over. But once you're over, then you can do anything you want. And of course, nobody knew that it would be to the extent that it was. So
Right.
Hey, Ted, this is Casey Malone. I'm one of the other members here. One of the things that I really have been thinking about ever since I knew that we were going to be interviewing you was you're one of my favorite heels, but you're also one of my favorite managers of all time. If you could manage anyone in the in the whole realm of wrestling right now, who would you choose?
right now,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
oh gosh, man,
Easy questions, right?
yeah, oh Lord, I don't know. Maybe my kid.
That is something I've always thought about. Was like, I would love to see you work with Ted or Brett.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, you won't. Yeah, well, you won't ever see Brett. Brett's done. He had, he was doing really good in developmental, and he had 4 knee surgeries in 2 years, 2 on each knee.
Ooh.
Then and then on top of that, he had a neck fusion, and a lot of that was just, doing things that you shouldn't be doing when you're a rookie, and trying to do things with guys that aren't qualified to do it. And he unfortunately had to learn that lesson the hard way. Sometimes kids don't listen to their dads.
Yeah.
But,
No, never. Well, I'm definitely sorry to hear that. I did not know that about Brett.
And I don't know what the deal is, with Ted, because Ted got off to a really good start.
Yes, he did a great
And
start.
the movie, The Marine 2, which in case you don't know it, is the second highest grossing movie that the WWE's ever done.
Well, I did not know that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
And then it was just kind of like, because the way the business is today, it's you got guys writing, they're writers, and they write storylines, and it's like they don't write their storylines so much. It's almost like they think of an idea, and then like, well, okay, who fits it?
Yeah.
I don't know, but Ted was hurt for a while. He had some injuries.
Correct.
And he's back on the road. He's wrestling in the live events, but they haven't put him on television. And I think the reason they haven't put him on television is they don't want to just throw him back out there. It's almost like they want to reintroduce him, which is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
So we'll see. I have people ask about it all the time.
Well, I know that'd be a good way to reintroduce him is bringing you in as his manager. So, I mean...
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you. I would rather, but, I say I would manage my kid, but in reality, it's like I told him. I said, it's, a lot of people think because, it's just like, like Cody carries his dad's name. They know everybody. They know Dusty's his dad. They know I'm my son's father. And that's going to make it easier for them. And actually, it makes it a great deal more difficult for them to make it, because the fan expectation goes way up.
Yeah.
It's like, you're always living in the shadow of dad, and so you've got to kind of break out, and you got to break out and be yourself. That's why when they tried to do that thing with the $1 million belt, put the $1 million belt on him and have me give it to him and all that, I didn't like it. I said, just let him be himself. It's kind of like... and even Teddy said that. He says, who could do my dad better than my dad?
Right.
Absolutely.
And he says, so hopefully they'll just let him be himself.
Yeah. Definitely. I'd like to see Ted back on TV, because I know him and Cody were a good tag team. In that with Legacy. But we'll just have to wait and see what's in store for him. I'd like to transition over into your ministry work right now. You're working there with Heart of David Ministries, correct?
Well, Heart of David Ministry is a ministry that basically that I created, and it's a nonprofit organization, 501c3, and it's a ministry of evangelism and encouragement. And basically, I am the ministry, but what this ministry does in terms of ministering is I have a focus on men. I try to impact men with the reality of what God called them to be, and God called, biblically, the man is supposed to be the leader, the spiritual leader in the home. And what's happened in America is the breakdown of the family. And when the family breaks down, then the devil's winning. And so, it's like I tell guys all the time. I said, oftentimes when even if you see it pictured in a movie or something, you see a mother, you see the mom taking the kids to church. It's not the mom's obligation to have the kids in church. It's the father's. And, men will stand before God and will be held spiritually responsible for the spiritual well-being of their families. And they're just not doing it. It's like 20% of any church does 80% of the work, and of the 20% doing most of the work, 80% of the 20% are women. And so I really spend a lot of time talking to men, and I just tell them my story. I had a tremendous career. I lived my dream, and in spite of the fame and in spite of the recognition and all that came along with it, I came to a place in my life where I was miserable. I wasn't happy, and there was an emptiness in my life, and of course, and like so many other guys in our business, I was filling that emptiness with drugs and booze and women other than my wife. And that all came to a head when I was caught. My wife confronted me with adultery. And it's almost like it's like overnight. Overnight meaning it's like it's funny because you rationalize sin when you're doing it. You make excuses for it, and then once what you've been doing in the dark is revealed in the light, then you see it for what it really is, and you see yourself for who you really are. And it's sad to say, but I was looking in the mirror at a guy who, I couldn't have been more selfish in reality. And here I was, I had everything I could have hoped for in terms of career and all that stuff, and yet it wasn't enough. And I'm out running around doing all this stupid stuff. And I had put at risk the love and devotion of a committed wife, and I had put at risk the future and the stability of my own children. For what? To stroke my ego, really. That's what it was all about. It was an ego trip. And that's when I broke down. That's when I came back to the God of my youth. I never dreamed that in turning back to God and getting my life right, that it would one day lead to me surrendering to the ministry. But and of course, I really the confrontation and the turnaround of my life happened in 1992. I was still wrestling. But
how was that working in the business, especially with some of the backstage lifestyles and all that? How was it working in the business with that lifestyle of being a new Christian?
Well, it was hard, and to be honest with you, I left. This happened in '92, and if you remember, the last match I had in the WWF as a wrestler was SummerSlam '93. I wrestled Razor Ramon, and that's the last match that I had in the United States. I actually went to Japan. Well, the reason I left the WWF, it wasn't because I was unhappy with the company or anything like that.
Right.
It was that I recognized that my life had changed, my heart had changed, but the environment that I was in hadn't changed. And so, if your problem is drinking, well, you better stay out of a bar. And you better stay away from people that are, just encourage you to drink. And so I was in an environment, and that's the way the business was at the time. And a lot of that was brought on by the schedule and the travel. And it was almost like, the wrestling almost paralleled the rock and roll scene, because rock and roll bands did the same thing. They were on the road constantly. It was the next town, the next show, the next party, the next girl, and that's how it went. And just whether it was wrestling or just pick a sport. Rodeo guys travel like that, and rodeo guys. You don't have a lot of drug heads in rodeo, but you got a lot of alcoholics. So it's just but it's trying to fill a void. It's trying to fill a void that can only be filled by Jesus Christ. And that's what I figured out. And So when I left in '93, I left because I wanted to get away from the environment to save my family. And of course, when I came back to work for the company. I left in the summer of '93, and by February of '94, I did color commentary with Vince for the Royal Rumble.
Yes.
And Vince liked it, and I liked it, and I said I'd like to try that some more, and then so that's when I came, and in between that time that the people saw me at the end of '93, and coming back, I had, I had 2 discs in my neck that had herniated, and they manifested, and I didn't have the surgery for some time, but I retired from the ring. And so by the time I came back, I wasn't a wrestler anymore. I chose to stop wrestling, and now I became a manager and a commentator. But those 2 things didn't require me to be on the road all the time. I mean, I had to go to the studio in Connecticut once a week, and then back then they taped the television shows once every 3 weeks. And so it worked out very well.
Ted, this is a question more specifically geared for my personal life. I'm studying ministry here, and I've been in ministry for about going on 2 years. One of the things I've always wanted to do since I was 3 years old, all I've ever wanted to do is wrestle professionally. I mean, even if that's just doing a local show. Is there any advice that you would like give to me as a minister wanting to pursue that?
Well, again, wrestling in and of itself it's not evil. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I loved getting in the ring and entertaining the crowd. That's what and it flabbergasted me, the people sometimes, after I got saved, I'd be speaking in churches, and they go, how can you go out there and be that horrible $1 million man and then get up in church and talk about Jesus? I said, well, that's kind of like asking the guy that plays the devil in the church play, how can he play? Somebody's got to play the devil. I said, as long as you understand that this isn't real and I'm just playing a part, and as long as I don't glorify the part, as long as I ultimately get my tail kicked, then we're telling the story right.
Correct.
And that makes them understand it. But the, wrestling as a vocation in life, it's just like I told my son. I said, if you're going to do it if it's going to be your career, then there's only one company to work for where you're going to make you're going to make the kind of money you need to make, because you're going to have you have a small window of opportunity, and you got to, you're only young for a certain amount of time. You got your best years, just like any other athlete, and you got to make it and save it. And but the downside of pro wrestling is the environment. Now, to the credit of the WWE, that environment is much better than it was when I was there today. We were on the road constantly. These guys work 4 days a week. They go home 3 days every week. They work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. It depends on whether they're on Raw or SmackDown.
Correct.
The exception would be going on a foreign tour. And the drug testing policy is state of the art. I mean, and it's like you just going in now. There's no they test you for everything, and there's been a lot of guys busted, and it's guys you don't see anymore, and sometimes you see guys that were stars in the WWE end up on TNA. Well, the reason they're on TNA is because they flunked too many tests and they got fired. So that's to the WWE's credit. But, to answer your question, it's kind of like God's given each of us gifts. None of us are unique, but we're all uniquely gifted. What God requires of all of us is to take whatever He's given us, whatever that skill is, be the best you can be. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be number one. But the difference is that you do it like in athletics. You do it like Tim Tebow. Do it, be the best, but for the express purpose of giving glory and recognition to God. And see, that's what I should have done. in the WWE, as I should have been the Tim Tebow of the WWE. I should have been, and of course that's hard to do. It's hard to live in an environment where you're surrounded by this and live a righteous lifestyle. Because the other thing the Bible says is you are what you behold. In other words, what you hang around, the environment that you hang around in. If you hang around long enough on the street corner with a bunch of drug dealers, guess what?
Yeah.
If you hang around the bar long enough, you're going to drink, unless you have accountability. In other words, unless you have, you can't do this. You can't do it alone. You got to have somebody that you're accountable to, that can hold you accountable. Because without accountability, it's not a question of if we're going to fail. It's only a question of when it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing for me. When I left the WWF in '93, I wasn't unhappy with them, but there was no accountability there for me. There wasn't anybody else there for me to lean on and say, you know what, it's like, when I get, I have good days and bad days. When I'm strong, it's great. Then I want to, I get into town, I'm away from my wife, and I want to go down to the bar and have a beer, and there's nobody there to grab me and say, hey, come on, let's go do something else.
Correct.
So that's what I would say to you is, if you're going to do that, and again, if you're called to ministry, then that's your vocation in life. What have you been called to? I mean, I was called to evangelism. I wasn't called to be a pastor. I wasn't. I'm not. I'm an evangelist, and I proclaim the good news. Now, the platform that God gave me was, He allowed me to have the fame that I had, because God knows the end from the beginning. And now I'm taking what God gave me. Now I'm using the fame and the recognition that wrestling allotted me to have for the express purpose of bringing recognition to Jesus Christ. So, and again, that's me. Now, if you're called to ministry, then I would say, then you got to know what ministry you've been called to, and only you in your prayer life and your time with God, and as God connects the dots, and it takes time. Will you know whether you're, whether He wants you to do it or not? There's a lot of indie wrestling in the United States.
Yes.
And some of it's pretty good, and most of it's really, really bad. You got a lot of guys that love wrestling, but they don't have a clue. That it's like I've been in the dressing room with some of these guys, and I go, "How long have you been wrestling?" I've been wrestling 5 years. I go, "No, let me rephrase that question. How many matches have you had in 5 years?" And they start counting them up. And I said, "Well, they wrestle maybe once a weekend. Well, that's 4 times a month. 12 and 12, say 4 times a month. That's 4, 8, 12. So you wrestle 12 times every 3 months. So
you got 36 matches a year.
24. So you wrestle 36 times in a year.
Yeah.
I said, I wrestled that many times in a month.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. And so, and it's a different business now.
Oh, absolutely.
But again, the other thing about that lifestyle that hasn't changed is all the other stuff. You still got guys, that are on steroids trying to look like Charles Atlas, and guys doing drugs, and, guys trying to hook up with the girls and the whole deal. I mean, so that environment is still there.
Yeah.
And, you got to, again, without accountability, you'll fall to it. And so that's my advice. It's the advice I gave my son.
I was going to say, because, of course, right now, I know you spoke earlier about working back in the past, of course, with Jake Roberts and with Razor Ramon, of course. I'm sure of course, that they're working now with DDP, Diamond Dallas Page with the DDP Yoga, trying to, especially right now, Jake, I think now is down almost 70 pounds since he started with DDP Yoga back in August, and now they've got Scott Hall in there. Have you had a chance to speak with either of those guys since they've gotten to to start with Diamond Dallas Page?
But I tell you what, I'm very proud of him. That's awesome. Paige and I had talked because I had gotten up to about 340 at one time. I was really, really heavy, and the reason I was so heavy was my knees were shot. So if I'm standing on my feet, then the heavier you get, the worse that is.
Mm-hmm.
I had actually gotten so bow-legged, I lost 2 inches in height.
Oh wow!
So in December, December the 18th, about exactly a week before Christmas,
day before my birthday,
I had both of my knees replaced.
Ooh!
And so I'm about 3 months out from that, and so I got those 2 inches back. I'm almost 6'4" again, and I've again I've lost I'm down like right around 300 pounds now. But that's not where I'm stopping,
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's diet and everything. But for Jake and for Scott, I'm proud of those guys because you gotta, those are two guys who and we've all thought it. We're going to get up one day and we're going to read in the paper, or there's going to be found in a hotel room dead of a drug overdose or something, and yet. They're really trying, and so kudos to both of them, and to Paige, for investing in them.
Definitely, we appreciate. We're glad to hear about DDP helping them out and all that. So. Before we let you go, we would like to, thank you once again for taking the time to speak with us today. And it means a lot to us, especially, getting to talk to you a little bit about ministry and all that. That really was a big encouragement to me personally. So we'd like to thank you, and we want to know if there are any events coming up for you, or that you're going to be appearing places.
You can see me at WrestleMania. I won't be on the show, but actually, I am. My wife and I are speaking this weekend together.
Very nice.
In New York, in Belrose, at Belrose Assembly of God Church, and that's like. We're going to be speaking to couples, and then I'm going to be speaking by myself on Sunday. The following weekend, it's not ministry, but I'm going to be doing an autograph signing and a wrestling show in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I think it's called EWF Wrestling. And so I'll be in Fort Wayne. That's the weekend of the 23rd of March. And of course, 2 weeks after that, I'll be back in New York for WrestleMania. And then the weekend of the 26th, 27th, and 28th of April, I will be at the Wales Comic-Con in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
So... And then the following weekend, I will be in Canada in a place called Cranbrook, British Columbia, for a Promise Keepers event. I've been speaking for Promise Keepers in Canada for some time now. So that's the immediate future, So, and I've got a couple of websites, and the websites aren't updated at the moment because there's actually 2 new websites that are under construction, and I'm hoping that those will be up by WrestleMania. So, and all those they'll be Facebook and Twitter friendly and all that other stuff that I'm not really very familiar with.
Now, of course, we got right now $1,000,000man.com. That's probably the most. Would you say that'd probably be the most up-to-date one?
Well, that's the easiest one for everybody to remember. Yeah. And when you go to that one, there's a link there to Heart of David Ministry. And I am the ministry, and I've got a guy, like I said, the guy that is building the new websites. he has my calendar, and he has the updated calendar on the new sites. So
Okay.
if you go to the old sites now, you're not going to see much.
Yeah.
In terms, if you're looking for my schedule, it's not there, and that's my fault because I've been rehabbing my knees and not delegating this to anybody else. So
Right.
But I'll get it done.
All right.
Where's Virgil when you need him? You know.
I know. We'll see if we can try to find him and see if we can send him your way then.
Oh, God.
Oh boy.
Before we let you go, one last thing. If you don't mind, if you could do a little plug for our show, and then we'll edit it down to just the snippet of that also. And
Okay. So what is your
The Figure 4 Fallout.
on WCCR.
okay, Figure 4 Fallout on what?
WCCR.
WCCR.
That's it.
and where? Where is that?
Williamsburg, Kentucky.
Williamsburg, Kentucky.
We're middle of nowhere.
We're just a bunch of.
Get to the end of the cliff. Hang a right. That's where we're at. I promise.
Oh, hey, listen, guys. It's like, I live in a little town too. I live in Clinton, Mississippi. They go, Clinton, Mississippi, $1 million man.
I've actually heard of the town.
Yeah.
I only know the town because I knew that you actually came from there.
I've actually heard of the town. My grandfather has said he's told me stories about driving an 18-wheeler through that town before.
Yeah, it's right outside of Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah.
It's a little college town. It's a nice little bedroom community.
That's what we are, is a little college
That's exactly
town.
right. That's all we are. We're a little college
Yeah,
town.
well, that's, Mississippi College is here in Clinton. And,
We played them. We actually played football against them a couple years ago.
wow,
Here.
how about that?
So
Okay,
very interesting.
so Figure 4 Fallout on WCCR.
Yep.
Okay, you guys ready?
We're ready.
Hey, everybody, it's Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. You remember me? That's right, the guy with all the bucks. And if you want to get your money's worth, then you need to stay right here for Figure 4 Fallout on WCCR, Williamsburg, Kentucky. And if you don't, well, then the $1 Million Man's going to come looking for you. And remember, everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
Ted, we thoroughly appreciate you taking the time to speak with us here on Figure 4 Fallout, and we'll probably be in touch with you later on down the road, maybe have you back on again here in the near future.
All right, guys. You have a
Thank
great
you
day.
so much.
Thank you very
Ted.
much.
Have a great
God
night,
bless
Ted.
you.